Welcome back to BragWorthy Culture. This is your host, Jordan Peace. Today, I'm joined by Mark Ralls. Mark is the president and COO of Invicti, and he's going to be sharing with us some things about how he's built culture in multiple organizations over a long period of time. Mark, first, let me just say welcome to the podcast, and then we'll kick it off.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jordan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So the heart of our podcast is to talk about bragworthy cultures. You've been able to build a few of those over the course of time. And so, traditionally, well, not traditionally, sometimes we focus on a particular organization, and Victi is who you're with now. Today, I'd like to take, if it's okay with you, the tact of how it's gone for you building multiple organizations over the course of your career, and maybe even talk about how that's changed and how there's been different challenges over the course of time. Obviously, COVID's an obvious one to point to. So if it's okay, we'll start there. But first, I'd love just to hear a little bit about your background that led you to today,
Mhm.
some of the organizations you've been a part of, and just how you got into the industry to begin with.
Yeah, that's great. Great place to start. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, so I actually, pursued my MBA, way back in the day. Actually, in a shocking reminder, I got my 15-year reunion invitation the other day, and it's COVID delayed, so it's actually a 16-year reunion. So that
Okay.
dates me a little bit. But
Yeah.
after getting my MBA, I went into consulting, and I was with Boston Consulting Group for
Okay.
a little over 4 years. And that's obviously an institution with a very strong culture, and within that you're very project based, and so your
Hmm.
team is changing and reforming over time. And so that was a place that I got a lot of training on how to manage and how to bring teams together. But ultimately, you're not really building a lasting culture because you may only
Right.
be with the team 3 to 6 months or whatever it is.
Hmm.
I left consulting. I had a 1 year old son. I wanted to be home with him, and actually, I got tired of leaving on Sunday night, and he was one size, and I get back on Thursday, and he's grown 2 inches, changed completely, knows new words. And
Yep.
so left consulting and went to work for SolarWinds, which is an IT management software company here in Austin, Texas, where I
Yeah.
still live. I was at SolarWinds for a little over 4 years, and they're really built first within the marketing team, and then we actually formed an analytics team
Hmm.
under the office of the CFO, and built some real distinct cultures within a broader organization, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
SolarWinds itself had a really very particular, very strong culture that wasn't exactly aligned with what I thought we needed within the analytics org, which is a little
Hmm.
bit more thoughtful and a little bit more measured work and projects that take a little bit longer.
Right.
SolarWinds was very much a go go go, hit the quarterly number public company environment. That was an
Mm.
interesting experience we can dive into. I
Yeah.
left SolarWinds and actually took a gap year. And my wife and I traveled with our then second grader around we hit 31 countries over the course of about 6 months. And then when I came
Wow.
back, I went to work for a Vista Equity Partners company, so within private equity, and then did that only for about 9 months before I was pulled into the private equity firm itself. And so I did
Okay.
about 2.5 years in the mothership within private equity, which is yet again, a very very interesting culture, and again created kind of a subculture within my organization.
Right.
And then left that about 2.5 years ago, and landed here at Invicti Security, where we've had just a phenomenal
Hmm.
run, and really have gone from when I started about 160 employees. Today we're coming up on about 450. We
Oh,
operate
wow.
Yeah, we operate in multiple countries: the U.S., Malta, Turkey, the UK, Czech Republic, and expanding all the time. And obviously went through COVID as part of Invicti, and helping leading
Right.
Invicti through that. So a lot of different kind of flavors over the course of my career. But
Mm.
again, this kind of persistent focus on how do you build a great culture, how do you enable people to do great work. And so I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm really looking forward to hearing deeper into each of these sort of snippets, these vignettes of your life. Some of the things we talked about ahead of the recording were a few facets that you brought up around building culture. One of which was kind of getting employees excited and motivated about a mission.
Mhm.
Um, and So I'd love to hear about that in all the various contexts in which the mission has been very different.
Right.
The style of work has been very different. Private equity is its kind of own monster, right? So that it's an interesting place to think about culture and so forth as well. So I'd love to get into some of that. So wherever you'd like to start, but in the realm of getting folks focused around a mission,
Mhm.
and whichever kind of vignette you'd like to take us down.
Oh, for sure. So I
Yeah,
think just to step back and frame for a little bit, I
sure.
read someone smarter, way smarter than me, wrote something that I read ages ago, and I don't remember who it is, but they wrote that basically, satisfaction in your career comes from three spots: autonomy, so the degree to which you control how you spend your time;
Mm,
competence, so how good are you at doing something of value? I think that of value matters a lot, and then
right.
relatedness. So how connected are you to a team or an org? And I think the middle of those, competence is really what what I try to focus around first and foremost when you think about a mission, right? So I think
Mm,
everyone wants to go home at the end of the day feeling like they did something of value and that they contributed in a positive way, to
right.
whatever the environment is.
Absolutely.
Here, yeah, here at Invicti, we are a web application security testing, software platform provider. In that we help companies like probably your local bank or other financial institutions, other companies. We help them secure their applications from
Mm,
malicious attack. Right. So we're
right.
making your data safer, my parents' data safer, on and on. That's a really tangible, obvious mission.
Yeah.
And so that's really fun when you're recruiting and you're hiring people, right? And it's actually in our employee onboarding deck. One of the first slides is that we help the good guys, in their fight against the bad guys. And like, what could be more, honorable and noble than that? And I think that's
Right.
when you're in that opportunity, that's awesome. I mean, and you should take full advantage of that. And we believe me, we do, because yeah, because it's easy for employees to see how what they do is of value, right? Because we're helping
Right.
secure all these applications. When you work for private equity, it's a little bit of a different situation, right? And that you really have to, I think, was able to build a really strong team culture. I actually joined and took over a team of about 15. By the time I left, it was over 40 folks, and we were running projects all over the Vista portfolio, which is a very broad portfolio of all software
Right.
and technology companies. And the team had a hard job, and that a lot of travel, long hours, and and really, when we did our jobs well, ideally no one notices.
Mm,
And because we were doing a lot of process redesign, process overhaul, helping companies build to be much more scalable into the future.
okay.
But if we screwed something up, it meant maybe the company can't collect cash. And I tell you,
Mm.
folks in private equity get real upset real fast when a company can't collect cash. And so you've got this kind of very kind of unbalanced risk reward framework where you do your job great, no one notices, and that's
Right.
success at the end of the day. You do it poorly, and folks are gonna notice in a hurry. And
Right.
and so I think when you think about building culture in that environment, you've got to really focus people back to the fact that what they're doing is so fundamentally important to how
Mm,
a company operates, and that we are going into these companies which are staffed by real people, right? Like you
right.
or me or our neighbors or whoever it is, and
Right.
we're helping take pain out of the way they do their job. We're helping them get more efficient and more effective, and you've got to focus on the value where that value is.
Mm,
And then the other thing that we try to focus a lot on, I think, there is goes back to that third idea around relatedness, which is how
okay.
connected are you to the team? And
Right.
so, an analogy that I would use a lot in recruiting was like, look, we're kind of like an offensive lineman in American football, in that if we do our job right, the receiver or the quarterback or the running back is going to get the glory,
Right.
but we know among our team that we did a job well done, right?
Yeah.
And we can give each other credit and kind of exist within that. You know, we can give kudos within our in team that
Right.
that hey, I saw what you did and what you did was really good. And
Yeah.
even if all the glory is going to the wide receiver, that's okay. I
Right.
see what you provided here. And
Yeah.
so I think that, you've got to kind of shift with the environment you're in, and you're not always going to have, hey, look, we
Right.
make the world data safer as
Yeah.
the North Star that you're aiming for.
Yeah, I'm curious, did that play into your recruiting in such a way that you were looking for certain personality types or certain traits, or maybe folks that were more intrinsically motivated because the extrinsic attaboys and thank you notes were you knew they weren't going to come, or like, or was it more about replacing those extrinsic, sorry, things with your own kind of recognition and making sure that internally you did a great job praising folks for, or maybe it was both. I'm just curious how you approach that.
Yeah, that's an outstanding question, and I'll tell you, I absolutely focused on that in recruiting, and in fact,
Yeah.
really used it almost as a filter. I used
Mm,
to joke that my job within the recruiting, other folks on my team would interview for technical skills, ability to do the job, ability to
right.
work well with the rest of the team.
Yeah.
I almost viewed it as my job to almost try to scare people away,
Huh.
because the reality is that if and especially the work that that team did, if
Yeah.
you are like, if you love that kind of work, right? Going out to a new company, on a regular basis, understanding how they work and how they operate, and then helping them drive change. Like, if that intrinsically motivates you, right? To your point,
Right.
man, there was no better job. Like,
Yeah.
what a fun way. And you saw all different companies of all different
Mm,
sizes, and I tell you, the perks and the pay in private equity are not bad. And
yeah.
so,
True.
that was really exciting to folks. But we also, I wanted to warn away anyone who thought, this was going to be, an easy job.
Right.
And, we would hire from, the industry and, big firms like Deloitte, or others, West Monroe, I could kind of go on,
Sure.
Accenture. And we had to make sure those people understood,
Mm,
like, look, we're actually, I used to use the analogy that we're like smoke jumpers, right? You're going to go jumping out of the plane, and only once you get below the cloud cover are you actually going to see what the fire looks like and what you need to do.
mm,
And if that's exciting to you, man, there's no better job.
hmm.
If that scares you, you should probably go somewhere else. It's going to be the place. And so I think, and again, it's finding, and so it is about finding out those people that were really excited by it and
Mm,
motivated by it. But people still need that appreciation. They still need to know the work they do
mhm,
matters.
mhm.
And so I think you can't forget about, to your point, the extrinsic side
Right.
and the recognition. But the recognition doesn't always need to come from the the head of Vista, or whoever it is. The
Right.
fact that
Right.
recognition come from each other, I think,
Mhm.
in almost all cases was enough. But they
Yeah.
had to have that intrinsic motivation too.
Yeah, yeah, no, I find that to hold up in many of the interviews I do, my own organization, et cetera. It's you need to be seen and feel heard by leadership, but the praise and the feedback from a peer level is almost more meaningful because your peers actually know what you've accomplished and actually know what you've done and the struggle that you've gone through to achieve it, whereas a leader probably doesn't, as much as they're going to try to understand and empathize. They're not going to know the fullness, right, of what went into achieving what was achieved. So that makes perfect sense. Um, what was I going to ask you? On that note of, oh, here's what it was. I was thinking about an interview I did recently where, and you touched on this really well, where you're kind of talking about scaring people away. And I did an
Mhm.
interview recently with a CPO, I think was his title, and he said
Mhm.
that instead of trying to build our employer brand by selling people on who we are, we just reveal to candidates who and what we are. And that is the best way to filter who actually belongs in your organization. Like, be completely transparent, show them the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then you'll get the right people in the door, and they'll actually, one, enjoy the job, two, stick around, right? And three, add to the culture that you've built, right? And I heard that all through what you were just saying,
Right.
around is you just revealed this you're a smoke jumper. This is what the job is, right?
Sure.
Like, and kind of take it or leave it. And that probably would make a recruiter a little nervous, you know, just like, we probably could have gotten that one if you had shut up and not said that. But you
Right.
know, like,
That's right.
but
Yeah,
it's
I
not
used to.
about metrics. Yeah.
Yeah, we had an expression on the team that, which was essentially the highest, praise we could give a candidate, which was, yeah, so and so is our kind of crazy, and
Ah,
that was kind of code for, this is someone who fits in, and kind of, don't get me wrong, I think there's a bit of, I think we have to be cautious, especially in this, that you still, like, you know you can build a great team that's
hmm
very high output, that's filled with workaholics, and
mm,
give them an environment in which they can fully indulge their workaholism.
mm,
That's not good for them, right? And
right,
so I think you got to have some kind of cautions around that, because ultimately, sooner or later, you will burn those people out.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
without question, no matter how good they are, sooner
yeah,
or later, if you give them all the rope they need, and to fulfill all of their workaholic desires, they'll
yeah,
burn themselves out. They will sooner or later hit a wall. And so you
mm,
really have to be conscious about protecting them from themselves,
yeah,
and also in creating mutual accountability. And again, that's something that I try to do on teams. It's something that
yeah,
we've done here at Invicti. Again, a very small, very fast growing business. You can
right,
certainly work a lot of hours, and you've got to hold each other accountable. Of like, look, that can
mm,
get done tomorrow. That can get done
right,
next week.
yeah,
We don't have to try to get everything done now. And so I don't want to, because I think someone could come away and with a cynical view, which is, oh yeah, you've created this smoke jumping mythos. You're all you're
right,
all
right.
linemen. You're a band of brothers.
Yeah, go, go, go,
That's
go.
all
Yeah,
code for just, hey, work 100 hours a week, and that's
yeah,
not the goal, because if you've done that,
yeah.
you fail.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, that would be the cynical way. I think the more optimistic view would be what you're calling for there is courage, not working yourself into the ground. You're saying, hey, you might have to jump out of a plane metaphorically. Hey, you might
Yeah,
not know what the problems are until you see the smoke rising at you, right? But it
right.
also takes courage to rest. It also takes courage to
Yes.
put work down, right? So it's a beautiful segue because one of the other things that you mentioned prior to the recording is kind of navigating uncertainty, and then COVID being a prime example of that. And what COVID did is allow people to work out their workaholism to the extreme,
That's
right?
right.
Because there are no lunch breaks and no, kind of coffee pot conversations. It was just meeting, 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 meeting for a while there until we
That's
all
right.
kind of began to learn how to be more healthy. We're still learning.
Yeah.
So let's jump to that aspect. This communicating and navigating uncertainty, and COVID could be an example, but anything you want to share in that pillar, we might say, of building a strong culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that we did really, really well at Invicti. And I give a lot
Mm,
of credit to our founder and then CEO, Faru Mavatuna. Faru and I had a lot of conversations about how do we handle this. Faru had been a remote first kind of proponent since
uh-huh.
well before that was cool. And in fact, Invicti itself, we haven't touched too much on Invicti, but it's the merger of two long-standing application security companies, one called NetSparker, which Faru founded, and another called Acunetics. And NetSparker was
Mm,
remote from its inception, and so he had always lived in a remote environment and was very well armed, I think, to deal with our employees shifting remote. But
right.
our approach as we went into COVID, and as during that fateful week when the basketball, the NBA season was canceled,
Mm,
we had a lot of calls and a lot of discussions. And at the end of the day, what we hit on was, look, if we take care of our employees, if we take care of our employees' loved ones, and if we enable and propose to our employees that we take care of our communities, if we
mm,
do those three things really, really well, then you know what? Our business will take care of itself.
yep.
The business will be what it is, but frankly, we can't control if all of our potential customers stopped buying because of COVID uncertainty. We couldn't control that. What we
Mm,
could control though were those three things. How did we handle, again, our employees, their loved ones, and our communities? And I
right.
think, and we meant it honestly and earnestly, right? We didn't know what
Mhm,
the future held, any more than anyone else.
right.
But I think by laying out so clearly and communicating so consistently that those were our priorities and that's what we cared about. And we showed
Right.
that in our communications, but we also showed it in our actions and the way that
Mm,
we handle people. When people got diagnosed with COVID, sending them care packages, offering to arrange food delivery, you know,
mm,
making sure that we pulled all their work activities off of them and distributed those among the rest of the team. Like
right.
it wasn't just words, it was also actions. But I think
That's
that
awesome.
it was, that's kind of what our employees needed to hear. And I think anytime you're going through that uncertainty or that much change,
Right.
being very, very clear and very consistent with your values
Mm,
is, is going, we didn't, we didn't try to build a really strong, I mentioned it was two companies that came together.
yeah.
One of actually the upsides for us of COVID, which I hate to say it that way, but one of the upsides was that we actually built a really, really strong Invicti culture
Mm,
because of what COVID forced us to do around communication. And
right.
so, I think there's various lessons you can learn from that, but one is just you communicate, communicate, communicate. When you think you've said enough, say some more,
Yeah.
say it again, and then at the same time, be act true to your values and not just what you say, but you
Mm,
gotta see it through your actions as well.
yeah. Yeah, that's not the first time I've heard that advice. It's really sinking in that over communication thing from a leadership standpoint. And I'm a few years in personally to being in a C-suite role in a company, and so I'm very much still learning that. But I'm oftentimes shocked when people will say, "Well, I didn't know that, or I didn't realize, or that what," and I'm like, I've said that 10 times. It's just more. I got to do more.
Right. Yeah,
And say it in a different way and so forth.
that's I think say it in a different way and also say it in a different place, right? So
Mm,
we communicate in Slack, and then we do it in email, and then we do it in all hands.
right,
Anywhere we try to meet employees to deliver that message, we tried to do that because you really
yeah,
do, and especially in that environment of shifting to remote. While we had
right,
certain employees that had always been remote, we had probably half the company that were shifting remote for the first time, and
yeah,
and again we just had to be so crystal clear and just keep saying it. And to your point, it was amazing the questions that would come up. We'd be a month in, and someone would be like, "Oh, so you're going to close the office?" And
yeah,
meaning like shut down, like give up the real estate. Not that I mean the
right.
offices were closed because everybody's offices were closed, but
Sure,
like,
sure,
oh,
yeah,
the
but,
remote going away. And it's like, no, no, no. Where did you get that? Like, what? Well, I just thought that maybe this was, and it's like, no,
yeah,
that's not the plan. Here's
mm,
the
right,
plan, and it's in a vacuum. If you don't communicate enough, which
mhm,
by the way, as far as I can tell, there's never enough. But if you don't
right,
communicate enough, then people are going to invent their own stories, and no
yeah,
matter how
yeah,
outlandish, imagine the most outlandish thing you can possibly imagine, and then take it three steps further, and that's
right.
probably what at least one employee thinking.
Someone's assuming that, 3 steps away from absurd.
That's
Yeah,
right.
well, that's great advice, and I think the other thing that I really appreciated about, and not about COVID, of course, but about the time we spent managing that challenge, that global pandemic, that sort of, I don't know, that foxhole that we were all in together, if you will, right? Like, what I appreciated that was you found out who really meant their values and who didn't, right? Like, who was just putting, like, just putting a poster on the wall that said, we're people centric, or what, like, who actually meant it and who didn't became crystal clear across those 2 years, right? And then you saw a mass exodus from many organizations, and you saw a lot of other organizations that were like, yeah, like, we lost about as many people as we normally do, right? Or less, right? And I think, in my estimation, would be almost all of that is about whether or not you took care of your people, whether or not you saw them as the whole person, and you actually fulfilled the values that you sort of preached when they signed up, right? Like, did you actually mean it? Because that's how life works, right? Like, you find out who your friends are, right? So to quote the old country
That's right.
song, like,
That's
when the
right.
chips are down, when things are difficult, and so it's, not that I'd ever wish for another global pandemic, certainly, but
Yeah.
it is kind of a beautiful thing to see when things get hard,
Yeah.
the the depth and the meaning and the bonding that can take place in certain organizations is really cool.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and you brought up a really good point there, which is, there's been all this talk of a great resignation, and
Yeah.
I've really bristled on that, and the reason is that what I've said, and I actually wrote an article on this, an online publication, that I actually prefer to call it the Great Reckoning. I think a lot
Yeah.
of what we saw
Oh, it's good.
was folks that during COVID didn't feel like they had the opportunity, or did the risk reward calculation, and it wasn't worth it to go somewhere else, and all that
Right.
uncertainty, and so you have a lot of pent up demand of people who realized,
Mm.
kind of fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I think you had a lot of people who said, our organization didn't live up to our values, and that's not the
Right.
whole story. Like, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
We've seen incredible wage pressure, really tight labor
Yeah.
market. There's been great new opportunities unlocked for people, and people have pursued that,
Right.
and I think that's wonderful.
Right.
But I do think there's a lot of it which really is a reckoning that if you didn't take care of your
Mm.
people, if you didn't live your values, then I think you paid the price.
Yeah.
Once when folks were comfortable making the leap.
Yeah, yeah, reckoning, I like that, I'm stealing that one.
Go for it.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Um, well, we've got a few more minutes we can chat before, kinda going over my guidelines on the podcast length here, but, so one other thing I'd wanna discuss, hiring and building diverse teams.
Mhm.
So diversity, of course, means a lot of things, race, ethnicity, I can't say the word
Yeah.
right now, ethnicity, there it is,
Really is.
gender, sexual preference, the way people think and make decisions. I mean, there's a lot to say there. Um, Talk about that for a minute in terms of, building that. You've got a remote environment, you've got even less opportunity potentially for people that think differently and act differently to connect and to work through some of the ways that they're not similar, right? So it's all the more important to express empathy and understanding and to listen first and speak second, right? So
Right.
I just love to hear more about how you're doing that today and if that's changed over the course of time.
Yeah, this is an area that I feel really strongly about, and part of the reason
Yeah.
I feel really strongly about it is, we did a lot of work, or Vista did a lot of work, and to really understand the benefits and the value of diversity. And
Right.
aside from the fact that it's just the right thing to do,
Right.
if
Yeah.
you actually look at the data, there is there, and I don't have this stuff at the tips of my fingers, but there are a tremendous number of studies that show that the more diverse your team is, either at the executive level or within the company, the higher performing that team is, right?
Mm,
Because you bring that diversity of perspectives, you
right.
bring different ideas. It's quite simply, you're just going to get to better outcomes and better decisions when you
Right.
have a better mix of voices in the room. And so,
Mhm.
I would like to believe that I worked on building diverse teams even before that, but having seen that data and those studies,
Right.
it's you are I would go so far to say you are violating your fiduciary responsibility to your
Mm.
shareholders if you do not build diverse
Wow.
teams, because the data is so unequivocal in the
Hmm.
outperformance. I think also, if there's some fascinating studies on, actually, so you can argue and say, okay, well, the way you measure companies is kind of squishy. There's actually some studies that show within sales quota achievement, right, which should be a very, very clear cut,
Right.
kind of area example, that female sellers who meet or exceed quota are actually paid less than male sellers who do the same.
Mm.
And data that shows that mixed gender sales teams overall perform much better than when you don't have, kind of a healthy ratio there. And
Right.
so again, in sales is sales. Like, it's the bottom line. Like, you can't really kind of fudge those numbers.
Right.
And so I think that means a couple things, right? So one, obviously, I think you're, again, violating your fiduciary responsibility if you don't build diverse teams. But two, because we live in a world in which many companies are not properly compensating, uh, you know, kind of members of the workforce that fall outside of, kind of the predominant, or maybe majority, or
Majority.
basically don't
Yeah.
look like you or me,
Right.
unfortunately. Um, if we live in a world where those people are systematically underpaid or
Right.
undervalued, then if you are, aware of the benefits of diversity and you say, look, I don't care your race, your religion, your ethnicity, your gender, et cetera. I don't care about your sexual preference. I don't care about, I care about your ability to perform, and I'm going to compensate you the way I would compensate anybody else who can perform at that level.
Right.
Well, then you're going after a group that probably is being paid below market for
Mm.
their level of impact, and you're
Yeah.
paying them market,
Right.
right? Or I mean, hell, I'll pay them above market if they deliver,
Yeah.
and that puts you at a huge advantage, right? It puts you
Totally.
at a huge advantage, and I think when you are able to kind of see past who people are on paper, or again the color of their skin, or whatever it is, and see like what do they bring to the organization,
Right.
and and are able to do that in a really kind of honest and unbiased way, I
Yeah.
think what you'll find is that someone who looks like you or went to a similar school or grew up in a similar area or has a similar accent, like chances are they are not the best person for the job.
Right.
But because of the way our brains work and because of the way somewhat we're hardwired, your bias is going to be for that
Yeah.
person who grew up where you grew up. You've
Hmm.
got to fight that bias, and you've got to
Yeah.
put very explicit systems in, but you also have to do some informal things, and you got to challenge yourself and
Yeah.
say, do I feel this way about this candidate because they look like me, or do I feel this way because they're
Hmm.
better?
Yeah.
And again, I've found over and over and over again, that if I fight my biases or encourage my team to fight their biases, we end up hiring better candidates, and
Yep.
candidates that, because you may take a person who is making 80% of market. Well, we're not going to pay them 85%. We're going to pay them
Right.
100% of market. And when
Right.
you do that, you also engender a level of loyalty
Mm.
and commitment from those people that
Yeah.
I think is priceless. And they'll run through walls for you, and they'll
Right.
they'll deliver great things, and they're capable of it anyway. It's just a
Right.
matter of you giving them the opportunity.
Yeah, because it's not about the money, it's about what the money means, right?
Right.
The money sends an enormous message, right, about what you care about, and about how you see the world and how you see that person. And yeah,
Hmm.
and I'd say about that bias too. I think one thing that I've experienced, and I've got a long way to go on this, but I've seen that bias fade the more I do the right thing, the more I hire women and people of color and people of a different background, different way of thinking, different religion, whatever, the
That's
more
right.
that bias fades in my heart, right? Where I just, now I've got all these experiences with people that are unlike me that I
That's right.
really care about, and I can tell they really care about me. And so when you
Yep.
go into the next situation for the next hire, it's, you feel less and less of that propensity to just sort of grab somebody that looks and sounds like you,
Right.
because you've had
That's
all
right.
these reps, right,
Yes.
of kind of doing the right thing, so to speak. And how cool is it that doing the right thing actually leads to better business outcomes? Like, how cool is that, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's just when you go down that path, and you do the research and you read the studies. I mean, it is such a no brainer.
Mm.
There is
Yeah.
just, I won't say money sitting in the corner. I mean, there's productivity for your organization, and you're essentially, it's an arbitrage, right? It's almost an
Yeah.
arbitrage versus your competitors. If your
Yeah, it is.
competitors aren't thinking that way and you are,
Right.
man, what a huge advantage that is.
Totally. Totally. Ah, man. All right. Well, we are pretty much out of time. But it's such a fun discussion, and so interesting to hear that there are these tenets, there are these ways that you go about building an organization and organization's culture, even if you're in private equity, or if you're in info security, or wherever you are, that is, there are these universal tenets of how to do that the right way. So super interesting. um Sounds like you guys have grown a lot recently, so I would recommend anyone listening reach out to Mark, hit him up on
Right.
LinkedIn, say hello, get some advice, apply for a job, whatever it is that you want to do.
Love it.
But
We're
yeah,
hiring.
Mark.
We we got about 40 open recs. So yes, we'll
Okay.
take everyone we can get.
There you go. Hey, man, I'm sure some people have gotten jobs through this podcast, because I often will say that, and I'm just like, I believe they're hiring. You should apply. So
Right.
I wish I had data on that, but Mark, anyway, thank you so much for spending half an hour plus with me and for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your perspective with us.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jordan. I love talking about this, and I love spreading the message. And at the end of the day, I think you said it well when we talked earlier that this is about how do we get more and more companies to treat their employees with dignity, with respect, with love, and
That's
and
right.
really just make work more enjoyable for all of us. We spend a
Absolutely.
lot of our time doing it, so it'd be great,
Yeah.
great to have great experiences.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and for all that can't see the video, when Mark said he enjoys talking about this, he lit up when we got to this topic. So it's I could tell that's the case, and I light up as well. And so thank you all for listening to Bragworthy Culture. We'll catch you next week, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.